بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, today we continue our Saturday reflections on the story of Prophet Yusuf. May the peace and blessing of the Almighty be upon him. And as we saw last Saturday, the episode I covered, Prophet Yusuf now is in a different place, in a different environment. Technically, he's a slave, but as we saw last time, the master who bought him wanted to take him as his adopted son. And accordingly, he told his wife, treat him kindly and nicely. So Yusuf is now living in a place of plenty, a place of abundance, place of luxury and comfort. And as I mentioned earlier, his master was one of the most powerful and rich men in Egypt. But Yusuf now will be dealing with a new challenge. His values are different than the values of the people he is living with. And it was a matter of time where he has to make certain choices that might put him in a situation of conflict with his masters. Now, when Yusuf was taken as a slave, he was young. The verse said that he was ghulam, meaning that he was a young boy. But by now, as we will see in the verse soon, he was a grown-up, mature person. وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. So the verse is telling us that when he reached the age of maturity, meaning that he is mature, he was bestowed with hukma, meaning wisdom, and ilma, knowledge. And thus the verse says, we reward the good doers. So Yusuf, he was now a mature person. He was bestowed with wisdom, knowledge, and that the verse also notes that he was one of the doers of good. So he was a good person. Now, the first challenge for Yusuf comes. It's not mentioned in the verse, but we know from the saying or the hadith of the Prophet that Yusuf was an extremely charming and beautiful person. Allah bless him with an amazing beauty. And anyone who would see Yusuf would be impressed with his unique physical appearance. So he was physically unique, he was wise, he was knowledgeable, he was a kind person. So Allah gave him all the good things that any person can hope. Now remember what I said about his surrounding. He is now living in the community of the elite and rich. And this community sometimes could be a pleasure-centered community. As Stephen Covey mentions, people have different centers. There are principle-centered people, there are money-centered people, there are luxury-centered people, there are pleasure-centered people. So the elite society sometimes or many times would be pleasure and luxury-centered community, and accordingly values sometimes are compromised in pursuit of pleasure and luxury. So in this case, Yusuf, his master, was attracted by his beauty. And she started to make certain gestures to entice him to have a relationship with her. So the verse says, وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. So the one whom he was living in her house or in her home, meaning that his master was seducing him to have an intimate relationship with her. Now, the scholars of the Quran or the commentators mention that probably she had been trying many times and Yusuf was resisting and refusing. Now, Yusuf in her eyes is a slave, and a slave at that time is a mere property. And the master can do whatever they want with their slaves. And a slave does not have a choice. Whenever he's told to do something by the master, he has to comply. So since he was resisting the gestures she was making, the attempts she was making to have a relationship with her, she decided to use force. وراودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسه وغلقت الأبواب وقالت هيت لك. Now she started using force. She closed the door and she called upon him to have a relationship with her. Now Yusuf's immediate response was قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي. He said, I seek refuge in Allah, meaning that he refused. He said, I seek refuge in Allah. He is my Lord who has made my living or my abode or my residence nice and good. Now the scholars here interpret this verse in two ways. When Yusuf said, Rabbi, my Lord, who is he referring to? Is he referring to his master who bought him? Or is he referring to Allah? So some scholars have taken the position that Yusuf, when he said, my Lord, Rabbi, he was referring to his master who bought him. So according to this interpretation, Yusuf told her, no, I seek refuge in Allah. I will not betray my master who has been kind and nice to me. And according to the second interpretation, he was seeking refuge in Allah and also telling her that my Lord, my Creator, Allah, is the one who has been kind and nice to me, and I shall not disobey him. So in both cases, Yusuf did not want to comply because it was against his principles. He did not want to betray his master, and he did not also want to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now then the verse continues and says, وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَن رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. Now, here again, there is some lengthy discussion among the commentators of the Quran. So basically, the verse is saying that she intended, meaning intended to seduce him, or she was determined to seduce him. And here is where the different interpretation among scholars comes in place. Hamma here meaning incline. And what was the inclination of Yusuf? One of the interpretation was that Yusuf definitely was determined not to comply, not to obey her, not to commit the sin, but at the same time, being a human, there was some inclination, but that inclination disappeared once he saw the burhan. And the burhan here is interpreted to mean a sign, interpreted to mean some kind of guidance, and we don't know exactly what that was. It could be some kind of sign, or it could be the knowledge that he had deep in himself, but somehow he realized that this inclination was wrong, and he stood his ground, and he continued to say no. Now, as she was insisting, Yusuf decided to run away, and that was the only escape for him. So the verse says, وَاسْتَبَقَ الْبَابِ. Both of them raced towards the door, but for two different reasons. Yusuf raced towards the door because he wanted to escape from the situation. But she also raced towards the door to block him and to stop him. Now, as they were racing to the door, وَاسْتَبَقَ الْبَابَ وَقَدَّتْ قَمِيصَهُ مِنْ دُبُرٍ. So she tried to pull him from the back, and she tore his shirt. And here something very surprising happened. Once they reached at the door, his master came in, and right away at this moment, the woman, the she-master, now started putting herself in a position of victim. And she said, ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم. She said, the reward, the punishment of the one who wanted to harm your wife or your family, your wife basically, is to be imprisoned or to be subjected to severe punishment. So now she is accusing Yusuf. She is saying he is the one who wanted to attack me, and accordingly he should be subjected to prison or severe punishment. Yusuf, with his pure personality, he defended himself, and he said, قال هي راودتني عن نفسي. He said, she is the one who seduced me. And of course, Yusuf was in a weaker position. He cannot have a higher word or a higher status over his master. Probably his master will listen to her more than him. But by the grace of Allah, someone came to rescue Yusuf. And this is a witness. The verse says, وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا. A witness from within the family or from within the household. We don't know who this witness is. The commentators of the Quran mention different possibilities, different narrations, but the Quran simply said a witness from the household. It could be, according to one interpretation, a wise person. So what did this wise person said? He said, إِن كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ قُبُلٍ فَصَدَقَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. So if his shirt is torn from the front, then she is truthful, she is saying the truth, and he is a liar. But if وَإِن كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ دُبُرٍ فَكَذَبَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. If the shirt is torn from the back, then she is lying and he is truthful. Now the master looked and he found that the shirt was torn from the back. فَلَمَّا رَأَى قَمِيصَهُ قُدَّ مِنْ دُبُرٍ قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ كَيْدِكُنَّ إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. So when he saw that, he realized that Yusuf was not the one who initiated, or Yusuf was not the one who attacked. He realized that Yusuf was a victim, and he said that this was a mockery, or this was a plot, and your plot indeed is grave or major. So now we will see how the husband reacted. And that's very interesting, the way he reacted. He simply said, Yusuf أعرض عن هذا. Yusuf ignored this. Yusuf ignored this. واستغفري لذنبك. And he told his wife, seek forgiveness. إنك كنت من الخاطئين. You were indeed, or you were certainly wrong. Now, some scholars say that his indifference, he sounded very indifferent. I mean, this is a major thing. She is betraying him. But yes, yet he sounded very indifferent. He simply said to Yusuf, ignore, and he told his wife, just, you made a mistake, and seek forgiveness, and nothing else. And this perhaps emphasizes or highlights what I mentioned earlier, that in the elite societies, the moral standards could be lax, and pursuit of pleasure could be something that any value could be compromised with. So then the situation we have now, she tried to seduce him. Yusuf refused, and she tried to prevent him from running away, and she tore his shirt, and she claimed that he was the one who tried to attack her, but there was someone who came, and his testimony was in favor of Yusuf. Now, there is a new challenge that his master has to deal with. Rumours. Somehow what happened between her and Yusuf started to spread. And typically, rumors, people add their own spice into it and make a big story out of it. So rumors were spreading among the women in her surrounding, in the elite community. So, وقال نسوة في المدينة امرأة العزيز تراود فتاها. So, women in the city started talking and saying that the wife of Al-Aziz is her master, her husband, Al-Aziz, was seducing her slave. قد شغفها حبا. She was, very much attached to him or interested in him. إِنَّا نَرَاهَا. So they were saying that she was attached, that she liked him, and they said that she was indeed wrong. Now, this is something that was very unsettling to her, and of course, she has to do something to address this situation and to make her image look better. So she has an image problem now among her friends and in the community of the elite women. Now, next Saturday, we will see how she dealt with this situation. And now let's look at some of the important lessons we can learn from the story so far. The first and most important lesson we learn is being a person of principle. So Yusuf was facing a situation where either he has to listen to his own conscience or he has to simply follow his desires. Yusuf was facing a situation where either he has to please his Lord Allah, or he has to please his master. Yusuf was facing a situation where he should stand for his values or simply give in into the values of his surrounding. The choice for Yusuf was clear. He said, قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ رَبِّي أَحْسَنَ مَثْوَاهِ. He said, I seek refuge in Allah. He refused right away from the beginning and no hesitation. And this is very important lesson for us, that many times we face situations similar to the situation of Yusuf, not in detail, but in substance, where we have to make a choice whether we listen to our own conscience or we simply follow our Lord's desires, whether we stand for principles and values, or we simply go with what is convenient and what is trendy. Now, making this choice for Yusuf was not easy. It was challenging because the consequences were grave. The woman he's dealing with is not an ordinary woman. She is his master. She has the power to imprison him. She has the power to sell him again as a slave. She has the power to torture him. She has the power of doing anything she wishes. So somebody might say to Yusuf, who doesn't have the same principles as Yusuf, listen to her, and by listening to her, you can achieve many worldly gains. But Yusuf cannot think or does not think that way. Principles and values come before anything else. And accordingly, he was willing to take the risk associated with his choice. He was ready to face the consequences. He was ready to deal with the anger that will follow with the decision and the choice that he made. So, my dear brothers and sisters, we in very different situations in our life, in our financial transactions, in our dealing with friends, with people particularly of power and influence and money and so on, sometimes we have to make a choice whether we take a stance based on our values and principles, or we simply do whatever is convenient and whatever other people want us to do. People of principle, their choice is always clear. They stand for their principles. Yes, they might want to be wealthy. Yes, they might want to be powerful. Yes, they would want to fulfill their desires, but not at the expense of their values and principles. So we learn from Yusuf, my dear brothers and sisters, to be people of principle, to stand always on what is right and not waver in any situation whatsoever. Second lesson or second observation we can make, my dear brothers and sisters, is what happened to Yusuf. Yusuf was a decent, innocent, respectful person. But yet, he is accused here of something grave. His master is accusing him, and she is calling for his imprisonment and calling for subjecting him to a severe torture. A story that repeats itself everywhere throughout history. People of power, they never take responsibility for their actions. Always they try to scapegoat and blame someone and victimize innocent people. Yusuf was innocent, and as I mentioned, the Quran, a muhsin, a doer of good, a nice person, and she's the one who tried to seduce him. Yet, when she saw her husband, she turned around and she started pointing fingers on Yusuf and asking that he should be imprisoned and tortured. A story that we see it repeating in every situation at individual level, not only individual, but even global level, where you see many innocent people accused of things they have not done and subjected to imprisonment or torture. And inshallah, by the will of Allah, we will see what the consequence of Yusuf's action and of Yusuf's choice was. And we will leave that for next Saturday. Thank you for listening and have a good night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.